The Galactic Senate chambers hummed with the satisfied chatter of 200 alien species, all basking in what they believed was their finest hour. Ambassador Vex-Kol of the Thraxian Empire adjusted his ceremonial robes, the bioluminescent threads pulsing with smug satisfaction. Today marked exactly 57 standard cycles since they had officially declared the human species extinct. Primitive mammals, he muttered to his aide, a smaller Thraxian named Chindar. Good riddance to bad genetics, I say. The massive holographic display at the center of the chamber showed Earth, a lovely blue marble spinning peacefully in space. No ships. No signals. No signs of the chaotic little bipeds who had once scurried across its surface like particularly annoying insects. The planet had been silent for decades now, ever since the Great War had supposedly wiped them out. Attention, distinguished members. The voice of Supreme Chancellor Morvex boomed through the chamber, his 6 arms spread wide in theatrical grandeur. The ancient Zephyrian skin shifted from deep purple to golden yellow, a sign of extreme pleasure. Today we celebrate not just the peace that has blessed our galaxy, but the end of the greatest threat to civilized society that we have ever known. Polite applause rippled through the chamber. Well, as polite as applause could be when it came from species with tentacles, claws, and various appendages that defied biological logic. The humans, Morvex continued, his voice dripping with disdain, with their reckless violence, their complete disregard for proper diplomatic protocol, and their absolutely insufferable tendency to win battles they had no business winning, have finally been consigned to the dustbin of evolutionary history. More applause, this time enthusiastic. Ambassador Zekanael of the Crystalloid Federation clicked her mandibles in approval, while the gaseous being known as Flux Prime released what could only be described as a satisfied wheeze through his containment suit. 57 cycles of blessed silence, Morvex proclaimed. No more surprise attacks with primitive chemical rockets. No more diplomatic incidents caused by their inability to understand basic hierarchical structures. No more. He paused for dramatic effect. No more humans claiming that impossible is just a word. The laughter that followed was genuine. Every species in the chamber had a human story. The Korthak Empire still talked about how a single human frigate had somehow disabled their entire battle fleet using nothing but mining charges and what humans called creative engineering. The Valorn Collective had lost 3 star systems to human colonists who had apparently decided that toxic atmospheric conditions were merely a challenge to overcome. I must admit, whispered Ambassador Telvar of the Aegis Confederation to her companion, I almost miss their unpredictability. Remember when they convinced the Dark Star Syndicate to surrender by playing something called death metal at full volume for 72 hours straight? Barbarians, her companion replied, but there was an odd note in his voice. Almost like nostalgia. Vex-Kol was about to respond when the chamber's main communication array suddenly crackled to life. The holographic display flickered, Earth's peaceful image wavering like heat distortion. A communications officer, a nervous little creature from the Nexus species, scuttled up to the Chancellor's podium. Sir, the officer squeaked, we're receiving a transmission request. From whom? Morvex asked, his golden skin flickering to orange with annoyance. The coordinates suggest it's coming from the Sol system, sir. The chamber fell silent. Even the constant background hum of life support systems seemed to pause. Impossible, Vex-Kol declared loudly. We've had monitoring stations throughout that system for decades. Nothing larger than space debris has moved in that sector. Nevertheless, sir, the communications officer continued, his voice barely above a whisper, the transmission is definitely coming from Earth's orbital space. Morvex's skin cycled rapidly through several colors before settling on a sickly green. Put it through. The holographic display shimmered, Earth's image dissolving into static. Then, slowly, a figure began to materialize. Bipedal. Approximately 1.7 meters tall. Wearing what appeared to be some sort of dark blue uniform with silver trim, human, the collective intake of breath from 200 different respiratory systems created a sound like a small atmospheric disturbance, but this wasn't just any human. This was a woman with steel-gray hair pulled back in a severe ponytail, eyes the color of winter storms, and a smile that could have cut through military-grade armor plating. She stood with the casual confidence of someone who owned not just the room, but probably the entire building and the planet it sat on. "Hello," she said pleasantly, as if she was greeting neighbors at a garden party instead of addressing the most powerful governing body in the known galaxy. "My name is Admiral Victoria Kane of the Terran Defense Coalition. I understand you've been having some meetings about my species." The silence stretched on for what felt like geological epochs. Somewhere in the back of the chamber, a Glorbonian diplomat fainted, his purple bulk hitting the floor with a wet thud. That's impossible," Vex-Kol stammered. "Humans are extinct. We've had confirmation for over 50 cycles." Admiral Kane's smile widened, showing teeth that seemed perfectly normal but somehow conveyed the impression of a predator sizing up prey. "Extinct? Oh, that's rich. Tell me, Ambassador." She paused, consulting something off-screen. "Vex-Kol, isn't it? When exactly did you confirm our extinction?" We monitored your planet. No activity. No signals. No space traffic whatsoever." "Ah," Kane nodded sagely. "You monitored Earth. How thorough of you." She leaned forward slightly, and somehow the gesture made every being in the chamber take an involuntary step backward. "Did you happen to monitor anywhere else?" "What do you mean?" Morvex demanded, his skin now cycling rapidly between orange and red. "Well," Kane said conversationally, "it's just that Earth was never really the only planet we called home. See, while you were all busy congratulating yourselves on our supposed demise, we were actually quite busy. Terraforming. Colonizing. Building. You know, all those things humans do when left to their own devices." The holographic display suddenly expanded, showing not just Kane but the space around her. What the assembled aliens saw made several more diplomats require medical attention. Ships. Hundreds of them. Sleek, predatory-looking vessels that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. They hung in space around Earth like a pack of wolves surrounding their den, and every single one had weapon systems that looked like they could crack a moon in half. The Terran Defense Coalition now comprises 47 star systems, Kane continued cheerfully, with a combined population of roughly 18 billion humans. "We've been watching your little celebration for quite some time now, and I have to say, we're not particularly impressed with your intelligence gathering." Ambassador Zekanael finally found her voice. "This is impossible. Our surveillance networks would have detected any expansion." Kane's laugh was like music, if music could somehow convey impending doom. "Your surveillance networks were quite good, actually. Took us almost 20 years to figure out how to completely circumvent them. Humans, you see, have this terrible habit of solving problems that don't have solutions." "What do you want?" Morvex asked, his voice barely steady. "Want?" Kane appeared to consider this. "Well, first, I'd like you to update your records. We're demonstrably not extinct, and frankly, it's quite rude to declare someone dead without checking first. Second, I think we need to have a little chat about some of the decisions you've made regarding former human territories." The chamber erupted in panicked chatter. Species that had spent decades carving up human space suddenly found themselves wondering if their new colonies might have some very unhappy original owners. "You see," Kane continued, raising her voice just enough to cut through the noise, "we've been taking quite detailed notes about who took what. The Thraxian Empire, for instance, has established mining operations on 17 former human worlds. The Crystalloid Federation has built research stations in 12 systems that used to be ours. And the Korthak Empire, well, let's just say they've been very creative with their expansion efforts." Vex-Kol's bioluminescent robes had gone completely dark. "Those territories were declared unclaimed after your extinction." Unclaimed by whom? Kane asked sweetly. Us? Because I don't recall anyone actually asking us about it. This is preposterous. Morvex declared, his skin now a violent shade of red. Even if you have survived, you cannot seriously expect us to simply abandon territories we have legally claimed and developed. Kane's expression didn't change, but somehow the temperature in the chamber seemed to drop several degrees. Legally claimed? Based on what legal framework? The assumption that we were all dead? She paused, letting that sink in. Here's the thing about humans, Supreme Chancellor. We're remarkably good at surviving things that should kill us. We're even better at remembering who our friends are, and who they aren't. The silence that followed Admiral Kane's words was the kind of quiet that usually preceded either surrender or total warfare. Ambassador Vex-Kol's aide, Chindar, had developed what appeared to be a nervous tic, his secondary arms twitching uncontrollably as he processed the implications of what they were hearing. You're bluffing, declared Ambassador Flux Prime, his gaseous form swirling with agitation inside his containment suit. 18 billion humans? 47 star systems? If this were true, we would have detected something. Anything. Kane tilted her head, studying the gaseous being with the sort of clinical interest usually reserved for particularly fascinating bacteria. Would you? Tell me, Flux Prime, how many of your deep space monitoring stations have reported unusual gravitational anomalies in the past 2 decades? Small ones. Easy to dismiss as sensor errors or natural phenomena. The silence from the Nexus delegation was telling. I thought so, Kane continued. Here's a fun fact about humans that apparently didn't make it into your intelligence reports. We don't just adapt to impossible situations. We make impossible situations work for us. Take faster-than-light travel, for example. She gestured, and the holographic display shifted to show technical schematics that made several of the more scientifically minded delegates lean forward in confusion. Your species use what you call fold space drives, correct? Elegant technology. Very efficient. Creates those lovely energy signatures that your monitoring stations are specifically designed to detect. Kane's smile turned predatory. We took a different approach. The schematics rotated, showing what appeared to be a ship's engine system, but one unlike anything in the galactic database. Humans invented something we call slipstream drives. Instead of folding space, we simply step outside it for a while. No energy signature. No gravitational disturbance. No way to track or detect. She paused. We've been using your own monitoring grid as a navigation system for the past 15 years. The collective realization that swept through the chamber was almost palpable. Species that prided themselves on technological superiority suddenly understood that they had been outmaneuvered by supposedly primitive mammals. This is absurd. Vex-Kol roared, his bioluminescent robes flickering frantically. Even if you possess this technology, you cannot seriously threaten the combined might of the Galactic Senate. We represent over 200 advanced civilizations. 201, actually, Kane corrected pleasantly. You keep forgetting to count us. Supreme Chancellor Morvex had been unusually quiet, his skin cycling through colors so rapidly it was making nearby diplomats nauseous. Finally, he spoke. What exactly are you proposing, Admiral Kane? Proposing? Oh, I'm not proposing anything, Chancellor. I'm simply here to deliver a message. Kane's expression became serious for the first time since the transmission began. The Terran Defense Coalition formally requests the immediate withdrawal of all foreign assets from the 47 star systems that comprised human space prior to our supposed extinction. The chamber erupted. Shouts, clicks, buzzes, and sounds that defied classification filled the air as 200 species tried to process what they were hearing. You cannot be serious. Ambassador Zekenael's mandibles clacked furiously. Those systems have been developed. Billions of credits invested. Entire colonies established. I understand, Kane replied, her voice cutting through the noise like a blade through silk. And we're prepared to be reasonable about compensation. After all, we're not monsters. A collective sigh of relief swept through the chamber. However, Kane continued, and the relief evaporated instantly, our definition of reasonable compensation might differ from yours. You see, for the past 57 years, you've been mining our worlds, using our resources, and profiting from our absence. We've calculated the total value of extracted materials, established infrastructure, and projected future earnings. The holographic display shifted again, showing a number so large that several mathematical species had to recalibrate their processors to display it properly. This, Kane announced cheerfully, is what you owe us. With interest. The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of the Glorbonian delegate hitting the floor again. Apparently, he'd regained consciousness just in time to hear the worst possible news. That's more than the gross domestic product of half the galaxy, whispered Telvar. Is it? How interesting. Kane didn't sound surprised. Well, we're open to payment plans. Say, 1,000-year installment program? This is extortion. Vex-Kol declared. Is it? Kane asked innocently. I prefer to think of it as a rather generous lease agreement. You've been using our property without permission for over half a century. Frankly, we could have charged late fees. Morvex finally found his voice. And if we refuse? Kane's smile returned, but this time it contained all the warmth of a supernova. Oh, I do hope you don't refuse, Chancellor. That would be unfortunate. Are you threatening us? Flux Prime demanded. Threatening? Goodness, no. I'm simply pointing out that humans have this annoying tendency to take back what belongs to them. Sometimes we're very polite about it. Sometimes. She shrugged. Well, sometimes we're not. The holographic display shifted once more, showing what appeared to be a peaceful mining operation on a Thraxian world. Then, without warning, the entire facility simply vanished. Not destroyed. Not damaged. Simply gone, leaving behind only a perfectly spherical crater and a small sign that read, Property of Earth. Please vacate promptly. That was yesterday, Kane explained conversationally. Mining Station Vex-7, if I'm not mistaken. Don't worry, we relocated your personnel to a nice hotel on the nearest inhabited world. They're quite comfortable, though I understand they've been asking a lot of questions about the giant crater. Vex-Kol's robes went completely black. How did you? Trade secret, Kane replied. The point is, we've proven that we can reclaim our property whenever we choose. The question is whether you'd prefer to do this the easy way or the hard way. This is impossible, muttered Ambassador Kex, 9 of the Digital Consciousness Collective. Our strategic analyses indicate that humanity possessed no technology capable of such precise matter displacement. Your strategic analyses, Kane said with mock sympathy, were based on the assumption that we stopped developing new technology after you declared us extinct. That was your first mistake. She leaned back in her chair, looking for all the world like someone discussing the weather rather than casually dismantling the political structure of the known galaxy. You see, being declared dead by the galactic community was actually quite liberating. No trade restrictions. No technology sharing agreements. No diplomatic protocols to follow. We were free to innovate without worrying about who might be offended by our methods. The implications hit the assembled delegates like a physical force. 57 years of unrestricted human technological development. No oversight. No limitations. No idea what they might have accomplished. The mining station was just a demonstration, Kane continued. Would you like to see what else we've been working on? No. Morvex said quickly. That won't be necessary. Wise choice. Though I should mention that our terraforming division has been particularly creative. Did you know that we can now turn a gas giant into a garden world in about 6 months? Of course, the process does require relocating any existing infrastructure to elsewhere. She paused, letting that sink in. We've prepared a formal treaty for your consideration. Very reasonable terms, really. Phased withdrawal from human space over the next 5 years. Fair compensation for improvements made to our worlds. Establishment of new trade agreements that recognize humanity as a sovereign power. And if we refuse? Vex-Kol asked weakly. Kane's expression didn't change, but somehow the lighting in the chamber seemed to dim. Then we'll simply take back what's ours. All of it. At once. And we won't be nearly as polite about it. The holographic display showed one final image, Earth, beautiful and blue, surrounded by those sleek, predatory ships. But now the view pulled back, revealing the true scope of the human fleet. Thousands of vessels. Tens of thousands. All waiting patiently in the darkness between stars. The choice is yours, esteemed members of the Galactic Senate, Admiral Kane said, her voice carrying the weight of 18 billion humans and the promise of technologies that defied understanding. We can do this the diplomatic way, or we can do this the human way. She smiled one last time, and it was the smile of a species that had spent 57 years preparing for this exact moment. I do hope you choose wisely. After all, we'd hate to have to correct your records again. The transmission ended, leaving the chamber in absolute silence. 200 of the galaxy's most advanced civilizations sat in stunned contemplation of a single, terrifying truth. They had declared humanity extinct, but humanity had simply been waiting for the right moment to prove them wrong, and that moment had finally arrived.